everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a recent reads video. So it's been a while since I've talked about the books that I've been reading, and this is books that I've read from the beginning of September but have not yet talked about in a vlog or some other way. So just want to catch you up on where I am. It is today, as I'm filming this, September 20th. So, you know, sort of halfway through the month. So the very first book that I finished in the month of September was an audiobook, and the reason why I chose this audiobook was all due to Patrice. Patrice had listened to this one. I believe she listened to it too, and had recommended it on her Instagram channel, and that is Freedom by Sebastian Junger. Now, I had read years ago, I had read The Perfect Storm by Junger and really, really enjoyed his writing style. Very adventure, nonfiction in an adventure style, very compelling and compulsive to read. So when she said that Freedom was really good on audio, it sounded like something that I would be interested in. I was interested in the topic and also like the author. So I grabbed it. It was available to me on Scribd, and it was very good. It is basically a mixture of travelogue and history. And in this book, Sebastian Junger talks about his time spent walking along the railroad tracks in the United States with a couple of his friends. And it basically being the last part of America where you can, you know, hit the open road and you're not under anyone's supervision. And if you can avoid the authorities, you can basically pretend like you're free with no constraints on you by society. So while he's detailing this trip that he takes walking along the railroad tracks with these buddies of his, he also ruminates on different kinds of freedom, where we get the idea for freedom, how freedom, quote unquote, has looked over the course of history to different groups of people. He talks about colonization of the United States and the impacts of that on Native Americans that were already living here and things like that. So I found it to be quite interesting and engaging. And like I said, it was quite a short audiobook, so it didn't take me very long at all. So I would recommend that if you like history type audiobooks and a mixture of travelogue type style. So I thought that was quite good. Now, I then read a book off my ancient TBR. This is Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates. And this is a piece of fiction. I think it was first published in the 80s, if I remember correctly. Oh, sorry, no, way earlier. It was first published in 1961, but it was copyright was renewed in the 80s. I think that's what I was remembering. And this book talks about a young couple who, if I've forgotten their names, Frank and April Wheeler in the 50s. And it basically details their marriage from the time they get married and them sort of their early years of their marriage, and then them buying a house in the suburbs and what life is like for them as Frank is commuting to work in the city for an office job that he is not in love with. He does not like. And her, April's life being a stay-at-home mom and in the suburbs and what that's like. So if you remember, probably you don't, but earlier this year, I read The Women's Room by Marilyn French, which is kind of this same story from a women's perspective, and this is the story from the man's perspective. So this talks about what life is like for middle-class white Americans in the 50s, when the social constraints around a sort of upwardly mobile couple really box them into a certain lifestyle. And if they don't meet those expectations, then they won't be successful, quote unquote. And Frank really struggles with this because he had this idea of himself that he wasn't going to conform. He wasn't going to be like his dad. He wasn't going to conform. And you never really get April's perspective, but you can see through Frank's eyes that April is really unhappy, is becoming less and less happy as the years go on. And she concocts this scheme that they're going to leave Revolutionary Road, which is where their house in the suburb is, and they're going to move to Paris. And they're going to she's going to work and Frank's going to you know, pursue his artistic dreams or whatever, and she's going to be the one to like allow him to like fulfill his potential. But is Frank really ready to do that? Is he ready to leave the security of a good job and a life that he's always known? So while I didn't love this book, I found it very aggravating to have only Frank's perspective on much of this. Like, you only are getting a male perspective. And because this is set in the 1950s, it's very sexist. And Frank is kind of a tool. And I mean, I do have some sympathy for Frank. He struggles with the idea that he's the breadwinner and these expectations that society has set on him. And it really is a takedown of sort of the capitalistic society of America in the mid 20th century and what that did to people and how it like sapped their happiness. But it's not a fun book to read by any means. It's really depressing and just sort of like, I don't know. I like The Women's Room better because it was from the female perspective versus this that's from the male perspective. So I don't know if anybody else has read both of those books and thinks that I'm crazy that I'm comparing them, but that was what I took away from it and all I could think about while I was reading it, to be honest. So that's that, and one more off the Ancient TBR, which was good. I then completed another audiobook, and I did talk about this briefly in my last vlog. I listened to Secrets of a Summer Night by Lisa Kleypas. This is book 1 in the Wallflowers series. It's a Regency romance. I read with my romance buddy readers, Doris and Katie. I've really enjoyed this book. It was great fun. It was about Annabelle, who is an impoverished aristocrat who needs to find a husband in order to save her family, and Simon, who is a wealthy commoner. And Simon has his sights set on Annabelle, but he only wants her for a mistress because he's not the marrying kind. And Annabelle, who knows she needs to marry a rich guy, but she wants to marry within her class so that she can continue to enjoy the type of life that she's always led. And so you can imagine what happens between Annabelle and Simon. But it was a very fun ride. Had many of the tropes that I really enjoy in historical romances, from country house parties to nursing your love interest back to health, sorts of things. So yeah, it was a good times. I then, let's see, what was next? I finished this book for the BookTube Prize. This is Inferno, a memoir of motherhood and madness by Catherine Cho. It is what it says on the tin. It's a woman's description of what it was like to go through postpartum psychosis. Can't talk about it any more than that. You'll hear my thoughts when the BookTube Prize is over. And then I read a book that had been sent to Doris and I for the book Naturalist to review from the publisher. This is The Heartbeat of Trees, Embracing Our Ancient Bond with Forest and Nature by Peter Wolleben. This is translated from the German by Jane Billinghurst. And I have read 2 other books by this author in the past. I read his The Hidden Life of Trees and The Hidden Life of Animals, both of which I greatly enjoyed. And I appreciate this author's take on nature writing because he is a forester in Germany and that's his training is in forestry. But he really approaches the subject from a very much a layperson's point of view. He's not writing about trees in a super scientific academic type style. He's very much writing from the point of view of somebody who loves trees and loves forests and loves nature. But in the meantime, he's also imparting a lot of knowledge about the science and the increasing knowledge that we have about trees, how they communicate, their importance in the wider ecosystem, their importance to other animals and other plants in their sort of communities and all of that. And then what humans basically are doing to forests, what humans should be doing to help trees or to help the planet, and how forests and trees can be beneficial to humans just health-wise as well. He gets into that a little bit. So this is basically a collection of essays about different topics, and he sort of takes you through all the different aspects of how humans relate to trees, from like ancient religion all the way up to like health benefits of walking in the forest today. So I think his writing style is very sort of cozy is how I would describe it. Very much more of a cozy writing style than a super academic or scientific type writing style. So yeah, I'm very appreciative to Greystone for sending these copies to Doris and I for review. I really enjoyed my time spent with this, and I also very much enjoy this cover. I also finished another book for the BookTube Prize. This is After the Last Border, Two Families and the Story of Refuge in America by Jessica Goudeau. And this is exactly, again, what it says on the tin. Two different families their stories of seeking asylum in the United States are outlined in this book. One family from Myanmar and one family from Syria. And they have very different experiences of the refugee system. And then interspersed with those personal stories is the history of law in the United States for asylum seekers, migrants, refugees, immigration, all that stuff. So there's like 4 or 5 chapters that talk about historically how the United States has handled immigration and asylum seekers. So I found this, I can't talk about it, can I? You almost got me talking about it. I can't talk about this right now. That is what the book is about. And I will tell you my thoughts after the BookTube Prize is over. And then one more book that I just finished this weekend. It's another nonfiction book. And this is one that I've been buddy reading for several months now with Sean the Book Maniac. And it's called Indigenous Rights by Chelsea Vowell. And the tagline, let me read my notes here because I don't want to get the tagline wrong. The subtitle is A Guide to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Issues in Canada. And this is an essay collection by Chelsea Vowell, who is herself a member of the Métis Nation. And I thought this was excellent. This was a 5-star read for me. Sean and I both really got a lot out of this. We read like 3 essays a week. So each essay is in its own chapter, and we read 3 of them each week and discussed them. And they were just so excellent because Chelsea Vowell, being a member of the Indigenous community herself, she has personal perspective on it, but she also has this excellent writing style where she brings a lot of wit and humor to the discussion of some very tough topics, but she writes them in a way that's very accessible to the public, even if you don't have a lot of background in this particular issue area or in this particular history. She is very accessible in her manner and in her style. I find it very engaging and very just made me want to keep reading her. I hope she writes more stuff because I would like to read more by this author. And, she busts myths, basically. She goes through, if you've ever read an article in an online like newspaper or journal or something about Indigenous issues or First Nations issues, and if you've made the mistake of scrolling down through the comments section underneath that article, there's a lot of garbage that gets spewed, a lot of myths that get quoted, and Chelsea Vowell basically goes through those myths one by one and just takes them apart in a very humorous way for the most part, although some topics are not able to be discussed in a humorous way, things like residential schools, things like that. She also addresses serious topics in a serious way. I don't want to downplay the seriousness of some of the topics that she's discussing, but she also was able to bring a lot of humor to these topics as well, which I appreciated. And I appreciated her way of sort of breaking down each of these but moments that white people often have when discussing Indigenous issues. So I think she does a fabulous job. I would highly recommend Indigenous Rights, even if you're not particularly interested in Indigenous issues in the country that we now know as Canada. I think a lot of the topics that she's covering apply to Indigenous populations the world over. Like the same sorts of things happen to Indigenous people from colonial settlers, white colonial settlers, in lots of places around the globe. So I think it's very, the topics that she's discussing are very important to a lot of the geography of the globe. So I would recommend that to anyone. So that's what I've been reading in the first half of September. I hope you are all finding some great books to read and doing well, and I will talk to you later.